Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever promised yourself that, this time would actually be different? Like, this is the week I'll finally start exercising, or I'm going to stop overthinking and just do it. And for a few days, everything goes great. But then suddenly, you skip just one workout. You avoid that difficult conversation. You fall right back into your old habits.
And before you know it, you're sitting there asking yourself, why do I keep going back to these old patterns? You might even think, well, maybe I just don't have enough discipline. Maybe I'm just lazy. Maybe I literally can't change.
But what if I told you that your brain isn't actually trying to sabotage you? It's not trying to stop you from changing at all. It is actively trying to protect you. Today, we're diving into the fascinating neurobiology behind why your brain naturally resists change and how we can finally work with it instead of constantly fighting against it. Let's jump right in.
Part 1. The resistance to change. A lot of people think the brain's main job is to make us happy. Well, it isn't. Its absolute first priority is survival. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors survived because their brains were experts at detecting danger. Every unfamiliar sound or strange path could literally be life-threatening. So the brain evolved a really simple rule. Familiar equals safe, and unknown equals potential danger. Now, fast forward to today. The dangers have totally changed. Instead of running from predators, we're facing career changes, public speaking, or just being vulnerable enough to say no. None of these are physically dangerous, but to your brain, they're unfamiliar, and the unfamiliar triggers those exact same ancient survival circuits. That is exactly why change feels so incredibly uncomfortable, even when you know it's good for you.
Part 2. Your brain's efficiency machine. This survival instinct leans heavily on your brain's constant need to save energy. Here's something wild to think about. Your brain uses around 20% of your body's energy, even though it makes up only about 2% of your body weight. Because thinking is so biologically expensive, your brain is always on the hunt for shortcuts.
And that brings us to neuroplasticity. Basically, every repeated behavior becomes an energy-saving shortcut. Think of it like walking through a really dense forest. That very first time you walk through, you're hacking away, pushing branches aside just to make a path. But if you walk that exact same route every single day, eventually a clear, smooth trail appears. Your brain works the exact same way. Every repeated thought, emotion, or behavior physically strengthens a neural pathway, making it so much easier to travel over time.
Now, this is super helpful for things we want on autopilot, right? Like driving a familiar route or brushing our teeth. But here is the major catch. Your brain doesn't judge. It doesn't know the difference between a helpful habit and an unhelpful one. If you've spent years worrying, avoiding conflict, or procrastinating, well, your brain has become an absolute expert at those patterns too. They're familiar. And remember, familiarity feels safe and takes way less energy.
Part 3. The inner brain players.
Let's meet the cast of characters inside your head controlling these reactions. First up is the amygdala, your internal alarm system. Its one and only job is to say, keep this human alive. But it often can't tell the difference between a real physical threat and just emotional discomfort, which is why your heart pounds before a big presentation. Next, we have the basal ganglia and the hippocampus. The basal ganglia absolutely loves routines. Ever drive all the way home and realize you barely remember the trip? That's your habit center taking the wheel, automating both good routines and past fears. Then there's your prefrontal cortex. This is your wise decision maker, the part handling reasoning, planning, and long-term change. But when you get stressed out, this logical part really struggles to stay in control. And finally, an exciting discovery from neuroscience, the VLGN. Think of this as your brain's brake pedal. It actually helps suppress and unlearn irrational fear responses.
Part 4. Overcoming competing commitments.
So our resistance to change isn't purely biological. There's a fascinating psychological plot twist here too. Organizational psychologists Robert Kegan and Lisa Leahy call this competing commitments. It's like, consciously, you're steering your ship in one direction, but below the deck, hidden, well-intentioned psychological defenses are pulling the levers in the exact opposite direction.
When you fail to make a change, it's really not because you're broken or lazy. As Kegan and Leahy explain, this resistance isn't just inertia. We are often unknowingly throwing a ton of highly productive energy toward a hidden commitment. It's basically unconscious self-protection. Picture a manager who genuinely says they want their team to take more initiative, but secretly they have a competing commitment to keep total control because they're terrified of looking incompetent. They're essentially shoveling sand against the tide.
But there's good news. You can expose these hidden defenses. Kegan and Leahy created a diagnostic test for this, which helps you map out your immunity to change. By literally writing down your stated goals right alongside the deep-seated assumptions that are silently undermining them, you drag those unconscious blockers out into the light. And once they're in the light, your rational prefrontal cortex can finally deal with them.
Part 5. The emotional roller coaster of change. So, what exactly happens emotionally when we force ourselves to break these deeply wired patterns? Well, because the brain sees change as a threat in a form of loss, we pretty predictably ride an emotional curve. It starts with phase 1, shock or numbness, where the brain just goes into pure protection mode. Then phase 2, denial or a kind of false optimism. But as reality sets in, we plunge into phase 3, anxiety and anger. This is when the amygdala and hippocampus get trapped in these exhausting neural loops. Sometimes, this even slides into phase 4, depression or a sense of learned helplessness. But if we can just push through that, we finally arrive at phase 5, acceptance. This is that beautiful moment when your logical frontal lobes take the reins back from your emotions, allowing you to actually regain control and move forward.
Part 6. How to rewire fear.
All right, we know what's happening under the hood. So how do we actually rewire these ingrained habits? Neuroscience gives us 3 practical steps. Step 1 is the pattern interrupt. When you feel that fear building up, do something totally unexpected. Clap your hands, radically change your posture. It literally confuses the amygdala for a second. Step 2 is reframing the memory. This means consciously shifting your perspective on a past negative event to drain the emotional weight right out of it. And step 3 is incremental exposure. By facing your fear in tiny, manageable doses while staying relaxed, you actively train that VLGN we talked about to recognize safety. You're basically teaching your brain how to hit the brakes on fear.
And when you're finally ready to build those new routines, you need to make one massive shift. Stop relying entirely on goal-based habits. Things like, I want to lose weight. Focus purely on outcomes, they exhaust your willpower, and they usually just fade away. Instead, shift to identity-based habits. Focus on who you are becoming. When you decide, I am simply a person who values health, and you align your daily actions with that new self-image, you literally reshape your neural pathways over time. It stops being a grueling battle of willpower and just becomes a reflection of who you are.
Knowing that your brain isn't your enemy, but rather an incredibly adaptable machine that just wants to automate whatever you practice the most, I want to leave you with this one question. Who are you training your brain to become? Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer. Now that you know exactly how the machinery works, it's time to start rewiring.